Okay, all systems running. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Monday, April 7th, and I am really excited to have this conversation. It's generated some interest. I'm glad to see that because I'm very interested in this topic as well. And so if you're just joining in, this is the first of these roundtables that you've ever watched. The scope of this is essentially a monthly conversation that I started hosting about a year ago because I started uncovering so many wonderful parents, educators, and advocates and research scholars who care about gifted and twice exceptional children, who have different angles and expertise on the various questions and challenges that come up in raising these interesting and intense little people. And it's been a wonderful way of beginning conversations and adding knowledge and nuance to these various topics. So this is just the beginning. I have been interested in the microbiome for about 2 years, but it occurred to me that something that we don't talk about very often with respect to autism, and April is Autism Awareness Month, is the importance of gut health and the microbiome and its connections to neurological disorders, and that includes autism. So just really want to thank all of you for joining me today, those of you who are live with us today, and those of you who are really interested and could not jump on today live. I got a bunch of inquiries about that, and maybe you're watching later. Please know this is not meant, Caroline and I are not here saying we are the experts on this. We are here as interested parents who have some training and expertise, some, I was going to say, some gut wisdom. I did not mean that pun, but I would say that's probably fair. And we're just really thankful that you're here and curious, and this is the start of a conversation and a collaboration on this and many other topics. So the reason that this is foremost on my mind is I was interested to note that many, many children with autism have some gut challenges. And so I just got curious about that and what does that mean? It's a topic that affects many families with gifted and twice exceptional children. Twice exceptional, or 2E, for those of you who may or may not know that, is gifted and another challenge, disorder, condition, whatever you want to call it. So it could be ADHD, it could be autism, could be learning disability, dyslexia, dyscalculia, others. These are things that Caroline knows very well because she is an expert in not only health and wellness, but gifted education. So before I go into just kind of laying the groundwork for this topic, Caroline, I was wondering if you might want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Caroline Morin, and I was an educator for roughly 20 years, the past 15 years in gifted education. We have a wonderful gifted program here in Virginia Beach, and I was fortunate enough to be trained by who I think are some of the best people in gifted education. And I loved working with my gifted students and families. I was a third grade teacher primarily most of that time. And also have always had great interest in health and wellness and nutrition and exercise and holistic wellness, and have transitioned out of the classroom to bring my knowledge of nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress, and helping people to change the way they think about those things so that they can transform their health. And so I love that this is kind of coming together here, that you've brought these ideas together here. I'm also a parent of 3 identified gifted students who are now in their college years. And we have all had our own challenges. I think food is always a challenge with every household and family, and making sure everybody's eating well and eating in healthy ways. And so I think that this topic that you've brought together today is just very relevant to on a lot of levels to all of us as parents.
Yeah, you raise a really good point. Food sensitivities are a challenge, and picky eating starts really early, and kids with sensory issues, right, have oftentimes difficulty eating a wide range of foods. So you're right on that too, Caroline. Another interesting connection. Okay, let's see if I can do all this. All right. I don't like keeping slides up for too long, but just to kind of organize and provide some structure, I know the interesting neurodivergent people in my house like to know, how long is this going to be? And what are we covering? What is the scope? When will we be out of here? They do that with my hikes as well. So here's an attempt to just give us some structure. Hopefully you can see everything well. So who am I and why am I talking about this? Many of you have already been watching these roundtables or participating, but again, for those who are new, I started my, I guess my working life out as an epidemiologist, and have been doing that for about 20 years, and only recently became a board certified energy and performance coach, specializing in working with neurodivergent individuals. And you know, Caroline, I think you mentioned it all starts with the kids. Actually, Sonia mentioned that before she had to pop off, but it all starts with our kids, right? And so many things about our own personal growth and development as parents start with curiosity about how to better meet the needs of our own children. And that's definitely true for me as well. Our kids, the oldest one in particular, had challenges with school and school not really fitting. And I think for many parents of neurodivergent, creative, interesting kids, this is a challenge. And it got me very interested initially in education and trying to understand the educational system and collaborating with schools and principals and trying to help, make a system work with a creative, divergent thinker who really did not need school per se, and was very interested in teaching himself and very good at teaching himself. And I think that is true for many parents of gifted and twice exceptional children. These kids have passionate interests and they're quite adept at, grazing very widely and then going deep when they want and coming back out and going to a different pasture and then diving deep there. So it has been an interesting challenge for me to avoid being a specialist in just one field and being comfortable with having, a wide range of interests that I will never be an expert in, probably. And I think that's why I appreciate this roundtable format so much, is I appreciate other people who do have deep dive expertise and can help me see things that I didn't see before and can allow me to explore connections that are meaningful, for instance, between gut health and autism. So I'm here to learn and to just share and hopefully spark some curiosity. And this is Caroline, my amazing collaborator in this. So where are we going today? So hopefully we're going to be touching on some of the areas that draw on our mutual expertise. So I mentioned I'm really interested in the health of populations. That's where I started. During the pandemic, I moved into vaccine safety and focused on myocarditis among young men aged 12 to 17 and up to 25 due to the COVID vaccines. Conducted original research and am continuing to use that training in epidemiology to read research and to try to translate it in meaningful and hopefully not too complicated ways to people. And also, keep a level of vigilance for junk research. There is so much out there right now that it's hard to sift through what is available and figure out what might be meaningful and helpful. So I'm going to try to do that. And then both Caroline and I are coming to you with a background in gifted education and advocacy. Caroline as an educator, me as not an educator, but as an advocate who has been working for 2 decades in various school districts in both elected and appointed positions to support parents and also support educators and also volunteering in the classroom. And we both really care about our new professions as coaches. And Caroline, you might want to jump in on this topic. It's so important. When we were out walking the other day, we were talking about the importance of practicing coaching in an ethical way, a way that focuses on the, the codes of practice, ethical conduct as coaches, and why being board certified really matters. It's a little bit of a tangent, but if people are curious about coaching and the profession and are looking for a coach, I think it's important to look for, we have different governing bodies, the 2 of us, but the one that I registered with is the International Coaching Federation. It's the largest in the world. And it ensures that if you're looking for a coach and you want to be sure that your coach is going to practice coaching in a way that is ethical, which is putting the client first and respecting the client's own innate wisdom, then you might want to look for people who are board certified with either the ICF or, Caroline, maybe you want to jump in and share what your board certification is.
Sure. I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach, which is a certification that partnered the ICF with the Medical Board of Examiners to create a certification program that would help coaches be able to work with doctors who are helping people with lifestyle change. So to help either prevent, reverse, support chronic disease. So it's a marriage of both of those parts, right? The health and the coaching.
Yeah, I love that. And coaching, for people who aren't terribly familiar with it, very quick distinction between coaching and therapy. Therapy tends to explore patterns and how we got to where we are, and is rooted in the past. And coaching tries to take folks from that point of being, functional but not optimal, and looks toward the future and develop, and this is your expertise, Caroline, and mine too, systems to help people get where they want to go. And systems can be anything from practical systems, like we'll talk about today, to systems of thinking and systems of even questioning ourselves to get at what is getting in the way. What are the patterns of thinking that are getting in our way? So it's incredibly meaningful work. I absolutely love doing this work. I know Caroline is really passionate about it as well. So it's so fun to share that energy with you, Caroline. Okay, so research is expanding, and this is getting into just kind of setting the table for the microbiome and why this really matters in the connection to autism. And then we'll get into, Caroline will take over and we'll talk about breaking this down and what can we actually do at home. But I thought people might be interested in seeing this little PubMed search. If you do autism and gut micro, and then I put the asterisk there, so it could be biome or biota, either way, you'll get the return of the research. You can see it's really expanded over the last decade or so. And about 2 years ago, I felt like the literature was settled enough that it was worth kind of trying to dive into it and understand all of these connections. This could be a life's work. And one of the folks who I hope will join us in the future reached out to me on LinkedIn and truly is an expert in this area. So again, this is just scratching the surface. I am by no means an expert, but I do believe in the connection here. And I think it's meaningful and offers us a way to do things like starting today with what we put in our mouths to make a meaningful difference in how we're feeling across all of the systems in our body, from mental to immune. So autism is now estimated to affect maybe 1 in 36 kids. At the gym it said 1 in 54. There are various estimates, but suffice to say, it's not uncommon. We all know somebody who either suspects that they might have autism, maybe late diagnosed autism, or a young child with autism. And for many of those who are also gifted, so that would be twice exceptional, there are medical, emotional, and sensory needs that overlap. One area that comes up again and again is gastrointestinal health, or GI health. And about 70% of children with autism spectrum disorders experience chronic gut dysbiosis. Dysbiosis means there's something off. It's either too fast, too slow, right? So it's diarrhea or constipation, bloating, or abdominal pain. Something is off, something's rumbling down there. So these challenges can show up early in life, and they influence everything from our mood to focus, sleep, and sensory regulation, self-regulation. And how is that? What is the connection there? So the gut and the brain are connected and influenced by the gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is the trillions of bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in our intestines, primarily in the lower intestinal tract. And these microbes play a key role in digestion, in immune regulation. So they're down there sorting out everything that goes in. If you think about it, like your nose, your mucosal airways, and your digestive tract, everything we come in contact with has to go in through there. So it should be no surprise that our immune system is very actively engaged with and involved in what's going on with the gut microbiome. Picture all of these little guys down there sorting out friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe with everything that goes in. It's a lot of work. So they play a really key role in immune regulation and then signaling between the gut and the brain. They help break down food. They extract micronutrients that we need, like zinc and selenium, and there's others, and they contribute to the production of important compounds that we need. These are neurotransmitter precursors, like tryptophan, which is the building block for serotonin. Something that I learned from one of my friends, Edith, if you ever watch this, Edith, I learned that it's important to convey the nuance when we talk about serotonin, because you'll see a lot of statistics out there saying that the gut produces 90% of the body's serotonin, which is immediately like, holy cow, that's incredible. And we all know about serotonin in the brain, right? Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are common antidepressants. So we immediately make that gut-brain connection. What's important to know, though, is the brain makes its own serotonin. So serotonin is used throughout the body. The gut makes serotonin. I believe the liver starts to produce some serotonin, or at least a precursor. So it's important to know that the brain does make its own. A number of factors affect the development and the diversity of the gut microbiome, and it starts really early. And I think this is really cool and very interesting for anyone who is either thinking about becoming pregnant or is in a pregnant stage. That sounds really crazy. Is currently pregnant and considering how maybe they're going to deliver if they have an option. So mode of delivery really matters here. So vaginal birth, offering the baby exposure to the mother's vaginal microbiome, whereas the C-section means the baby's first introduction into the microbes that will populate its microbiome is the skin and other hospital-based environmental microbes. Other things that matter after birth, actually I should back up, even in the womb, the mother's microbiome is affected by stress, and that also influences the baby's microbiome development. So in the womb, and then during birth, and then in the first 2 years of life, exposure to antibiotics is a key factor. Breastfeeding, I learned during the pandemic, because of lockdown, we had a natural experiment going on where we could look at, how many people are coming in and out of the house, how many siblings are in the house, the other people living in the household, were they exposed to going outside the household and doing their normal jobs during the pandemic, or were they all locked down? That all affects the microbiome, and it also affects skin sensitivities and allergies. So it's a very interesting natural experiment that you can explore if you're curious about looking at this further. Pets, living on farms, nutrition and environmental stressors all affect our microbiome. They all shape our overall development and, in turn, behavior and immunity. Now, behavior might seem like a stretch, but I'll get to the animal models that describe that the gut microbiome actually can influence behavior. So the way that works is through blood-brain barrier permeability. And that starts with the gut, the actual intestine. So if you're eating prebiotics, which Caroline will probably get into, the prebiotics are the healthy foods and vegetables and high dietary fiber. They create these things called short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids help create little links, like little carabiners between the cells in your intestines, and it keeps their junctions really tight like this. If you don't have enough short-chain fatty acids and you're not creating enough mucus and you're not keeping these little cells bound tight, and you start to get what's called leaky gut syndrome. Things pop open just a little bit, and that means the stuff from inside your gut can shoot out. And those antigens that shoot out start to get places where they really shouldn't be. And that can trigger autoimmune conditions because your body is like, oh, hey, that's not where it should be. I need to go after that. And then that leads to other things. So this is why nutritional interventions can often help with things like thyroid disorders, even although that connection may seem very tenuous and difficult to understand. That's why it's through leaky gut. So the gut and the brain communicate through the enteric nervous system, which is in the gut nervous system, and that's sometimes called the second brain. And that enteric nervous system in the intestines and the central nervous system are connected by the vagus nerve, another incredibly fruitful exploration and deep dive that would take a year if people are interested, polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve. And so that system is what regulates autonomic function, heart rate, things like that, breathing. Highly processed foods, Caroline, I'm sure you're going to talk about this, alter the gut microbiome. It tends to feed the bad guys. I hate to oversimplify, but when we eat sugar and processed food, we tend to feed the bad guys. The good guys are hungry. They don't feel like they've eaten yet because we're feeding the bad guys. So the good guys are waiting for their food. That's why we don't have the signals to tell our brain, hey, you're actually full, because the good guys haven't eaten yet. And that's why when we eat well, and I notice this in myself, if I eat enough protein, man, I stay full a long time. It's actually really, really noticeable. If I don't eat well and I eat too many carbs, I crash and I get hungry right away. I'm just checking over my notes and finding that I'm going by gut and skipping around a lot. Caroline, should I pause for a second and see if there's any questions from you or anything you'd like to jump in?
No, I think that this is all, I'm going to pick up on all of this and sharing some kind of overall nutrition 101 kinds of things and how those pertain to maybe family systems, and share some ideas and recipes, and maybe hear some questions from anybody who's in the room also that we could address too. So
cool.
So keep going.
Much more. All right, I'll forge ahead. As you can see, I like to let people know like where the slides are so they can see what's ahead. And I'm happy to share these slides too. So just to cover a few things that affect gut diversity, I think I already talked about that on the left side of this slide. And I touched on the most of the information here on the right side of the slide. And then the gut-brain connection is what we're currently talking about right now. I just forgot to advance the slide here, so apologies for that. Over the past decade, what's really fascinating is the research into the gut-brain axis has really exploded, and it highlights how the gut microbiome affects conditions like autism spectrum, and then associated challenges to include things like anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, and then I already touched on the thyroid conditions, Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, which, women my age, in 40s, 50s, 60s, it's not uncommon to have a thyroid condition. So, if you haven't thought about that and you're feeling a little off, it's worth talking to your PCP about. So this is the next thing I wanted to mention is the really cool animal model that is just one of many, but it highlights the connection between the body behaviors, the gut microbiome, and the brain. So it was a rodent model, and it demonstrated that a fecal transplant, a fecal microbiota transplant from one rat to another changed the behavior. So if we look at an anxious rat and then a rat that was behaving typically, we transfer the fecal microbiota from the anxious rat to the normal rat. The normal rat starts developing anxious behaviors. And then the converse was true as well. Taking a fecal transplant from the normal rat and putting it in the anxious rat helped to calm that anxious rat down. So this suggests that the gut microbes actually really do play a role in brain function and behavior, at least in animal models. About, as I mentioned before, 90% of the serotonin is produced in the gut. And that's a really important hormone for immune signaling, vagus nerve activation, and the gut is really responsible for helping with all of these other metabolites. Metabolites are downstream molecules that we need for our body to run. And so the gut microbes are not only helping us ferment our food, but they're producing the micronutrients we need and also the precursors to these other molecules that are essential for us to function. So emerging studies show that the gut microbiome in children with autism spectrum disorders, ASD, is often different from that of neurotypical children. One of the clues that they found, and this is really emerging research, I hesitate to put too much emphasis on this because, gut microbiome diversity is a very individualized thing. It's probably safe to say that we're all very different, but when you roll up kids with autism spectrum into a group and you look overall at the composition, and you roll up the neurotypical kids and you look overall at the composition, you do start to see some differences. One of them that was picked up on is lower levels of bifidobacteria in the kids with autism, and another one, Prevotella. But there may also be sex-based differences in the gut microbiome. And there have been some small-scale clinical trials looking at certain probiotics or even fecal transplants, like I mentioned before with the rat, as potential avenues for therapy. Again, this is very preliminary research. There's very, very small studies, and I just don't think the evidence is solid enough, but I'm open to hearing from somebody who really knows this area very well. I think that what really matters here is the knowledge that the connection is real, that we can do something about it before we go to advanced therapies like fecal transplants, which do have risks. There are downsides to that. You could have something in that fecal transplant, like if you're immune compromised and you do a fecal transplant, there could be something that is not good for you and really would not be great for you to have in your body, especially if you're immune compromised. So we don't need to go to these extreme therapies before we start to see benefits. And I hope that what I've laid out here is just an understanding of the interconnection between the gut and the brain, and why that really matters, and how it might influence things like behavior changes through blood-brain barrier leakiness, through having the right neurotransmitters available, also systemic inflammation. If we're not eating well, I mentioned that things are leaking out, that triggers systemic inflammation. That can then trigger these inflammatory cytokines where you're in a constant state of inflammation. So I think it's important that we understand that this all makes theoretical sense and is an avenue to explore for parents who are dealing with trying to help their children self-manage as well as possible, and looking for non-pharmaceutical means of offering another tool, right, in the arsenal for self-regulation without having to go to more extremes and more therapies, more diagnoses. It's something that we can bring into the house right now. So I want to turn it over to Caroline, who really brings a unique and incredibly valuable perspective. And just to reiterate, Caroline is not only a certified health and wellness coach, but also spent years teaching and working with kids. We're both parents of gifted kids. And we understand that it is challenging to have interesting and intense people in the house. And we just want to offer some simple strategies and insights into how to maybe bring in, like, take all of this theoretical stuff that I just tried to digest probably very poorly and put out there, but just bring it into the household, and what can we actually do to support our families in feeling their best. So thank you, Caroline. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was, I love, this is a great transition to say, sometimes when we see these big problems, a really small solution can be that is something that's within our control, can be just a really good place to start. So I really enjoy the fact that I see myself as a generalist in all of this, understanding of nutrition and wellness. And I really like to help people find practical ways, practical levers to pull that could, potentially make a big change in their health and well-being, whether it be physical health, mental health, or emotional health, because those are all connected and all are impacted by the food that we eat and the lifestyles that we live. And so I'm going to kind of like zoom back and talk a little bit on a practical level. And I love to teach people to kind of shift the way they think around food. We come to this idea of food and nutrition with all sorts of like background baggage, from the way we were taught about food as children to maybe through like our adult life, if people have gone through dieting or weight loss, or just if you're just living in this world, we get so much noise about nutrition coming at us from all directions. But I like to help people to think about nutrition two different ways. One, food is energy, because our cells convert that energy from food, convert food into energy at a cellular level. So we want to think about that. Are we getting balanced energy in? And then food is also information. It signals our cells to tell them to do their job. And so making sure that we have a balanced plate can really help with this. And I'm specifically going to talk a little bit about some nutrition in terms of helping us to have a healthy gut, right? And number one, that starts with focusing on whole foods. And that doesn't mean that we're demonizing processed foods, but it means that with every choice we make, we just start to look more closely on, if we're looking at a continuum of processed foods and whole foods, that we're just making choices that are inching closer to the whole foods side of the continuum. So looking at creating a balanced plate that's really heavy with plenty of fiber-rich complex carbohydrates, whole grains, sweet potatoes, quinoa, potatoes, yams, fruits. Plenty of vegetables, right? A variety of vegetables. These plant-based foods are full of the phytonutrients, and there are thousands of phytonutrients. Scientists are discovering new phytonutrients all the time. It's important to note that nutrition science is so young, and we're still learning so much. I am by no means an expert in any of this, and I just love learning more and more all the time. But we know that these are sound nutritional practices that have stood the test of time, right? We want to have a variety of vegetables on our plate. We want to have a focus on enough protein. Protein helps us to do more than build muscle, but it helps our cells to repair, and it helps even our brains to create those neurotransmitters to help us regulate our emotion, which is something important in all children, and particularly our gifted and twice exceptional children. Also plenty of healthy fats, and we're going to talk a little bit about some fermented foods. But I think if there were a couple of things, and I believe Allison created a little handout that will kind of touch on some of these points. Number one is if there was one lever that you could pull at home immediately, would be just to start increasing variety. And I like to think about how to help families and children to do that. And that's by involving our kids in the choice of food. So going to the grocery store produce section, going to a farmer's market if you've got one nearby, growing vegetables in the garden, even if it's just one little plant in a container pot on the back deck, right? Getting children involved in making their choice, giving them some autonomy over this, right? So increasing variety, because our gut likes all kinds. Every plant has a different makeup that our gut needs. We want to focus on fiber too. Foods that are high in fiber include oats, lentils, beans. Beans are a really great thing to look for different ways to include. Some flax seeds, chia seeds, nuts, berries. Think about those fruits that have got seeds in them that don't dissolve, right? And then we want to think about some fermented foods. Think about yogurts, kefirs, a miso, sauerkraut, or kimchi. Starting to introduce some of these fiber foods really slowly, and like it's noted, some children have sensory issues or taste issues. I myself was one of those kids. I was an incredibly picky eater. I was such a picky eater that my pediatrician wrote me a prescription to be able to bring donuts to school instead of eating the school lunch, because they just wanted me to eat. Like, if that's all the girls can eat, let her eat donuts. And I think about that now, and I'm like, what was that doing to my gut health as a kiddo, right? But we've learned a lot. We've come a long way, right? And so really involving kids in trying things and testing things and not forcing things, but getting curious, coming to food from a place of nourishment and joy and fuel, and sharing this information that Allison shared at the beginning. Like, this is why we want to eat lots of plants and complex carbohydrates, because the healthy bacteria in our gut needs to eat that. So like, let's feed that healthy bacteria, depending on the age of the kiddos that you're talking to. But we want to make sure that they know the why behind what we're eating, right? Kids, especially our gifted and twice exceptional kids, like to know the why. And the great thing about working with gifted kids is that they can get this, right? I think about in terms of like, if it was in my classroom, like, I don't know, let's go research this. Like, why do we need fiber? Like, what does fiber do? There's some different kinds of fiber. What questions do you have about fiber? Where could we go to find this information? Gifted kids are so fun to work with, because they might not just want to go Google, they might want to go talk to the farmer at the farmer's market and be like, why do I want to eat these vegetables? What makes these vegetables better than the potato chips? They might have all kinds of questions that they want to research and uncover. They might want to try different recipes, right? They might want to try their hand at cooking. So thinking about supplements, right? Probiotic supplements can be helpful for kids and adults. There's a vast array of different types of probiotics. So that could be something to ask your practitioner, your medical practitioner about, for some guidelines or suggestions on some good choices there. But we need to remember that those aren't a standalone solution, because if we're not feeding our gut with that whole food, with those plant-based fibers, those probiotics aren't really going to have very much to do in the gut if we don't have the prebiotic food that we're feeding our gut. And then making that note of like encouraging outdoor play and outdoor exposure, right? Playing with pets, being barefoot in the grass, right? Digging in the garden, right? Getting all of those microbes from our outdoor environment just helps our body to build resilience, are good for our gut in addition. And then don't forget about stress with our kiddos, our gifted and twice exceptional kiddos. Can really be a big factor. Allison, I like what you said about the self-regulation, right? Piece of the puzzle is so important. And food can be a part of that, of regulating. When we see our kiddos in a dysregulated state, it can always be a good first check, right? Like the old grandma routine of like, okay, when's the last time you ate? Are you tired? Are you thirsty? We can sometimes forget those things, right? That can be a good first line of defense to look to nutrition, because that's something that is within our control, right? We don't need to like wait to get an appointment to see someone to solve a problem. We can start taking action while we're waiting for those kind of bigger guns, right there in our home with the food that we're putting on our plate. So I think it's that important reminder that none of this is about striving for perfection or getting a perfect diet or a perfect gut health. We just want to start making small changes and start thinking about some well-rounded changes that can make a big difference. I think I just finished reading this Seth Godin's new book about strategy. I think it's called This Is Strategy. And one of the things he says is often big problems need small solutions. And that's really been jumping out and really coming to mind in this conversation as we were speaking. So I know we're coming up on time, but I have a recipe guide that I'll drop in the chat that can maybe share some ideas for new foods to try, for just some exploration. I encourage people to come to changes in nutrition from a place of curiosity, like thinking like a scientist. Let's try some new things. Let's see how this food makes us feel, right? And starting to make that connection between what we eat and how we feel.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just such a natural way of talking about this that conveys your experience and working with people to make these small, changes in their lives that really add up to big differences, like 1% every day is a big difference over a long time. You touched on something that I should have clarified, and it sounds like you know this difference very well. The probiotics are the little critters, the microbes. The probiotics are the live creatures. The prebiotics are the foods that feed the live creatures. So I should have made that more clear to begin with. The prebiotics I did not know about when I delved into this foray. I just knew about the probiotics. But when I realized that they needed their own food supply. It was like feeding the fish. You cannot forget to feed the fish. We wouldn't forget to feed our goldfish. We're our little fishies, right? Every day. So our probiotics need the fish. One thing that was not mentioned in here is kombucha. It might have too much sugar for some people who need to watch out for sugar, but I use that for instead of drinking alcohol, actually. I'll have kombucha because it's got this like zesty sort of taste. It's, it's bubbly. I'll drink it in the afternoon if I need a little bit of a pick-me-up. So it should have been in there in the list of fermented foods. I neglected to include that one.
Yeah, I think I could talk all day about different types of fiber, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, resistant fiber, the prebiotic and the probiotic. So I think in terms of simplifying to, we can there's so much science behind it, but we can just start small, right?
We can start small. I don't know about you, Caroline, but I'm very guilty of talking about all this on our way to going out to eat with the family. And I will somehow bring up all of the short chain fatty acids and then the great mucus that it helps create. And then I end up talking about mucousy fecal pellets, which I read about one time, and how there's a double layer of slime, not only on the inside of your intestine, but also around the fecal pellets, which helps it shoot right out. So, I like to work in poop talk anytime I can, but it makes a big difference actually if you have a child who's constipated. And I have run into parents who this is a major concern. It gets in the way of going to school. It disrupts life. It's painful.
Yeah.
And if this can help somebody out there, I'm okay with being silly about the poop talk because I would love to know if somebody tries some of these strategies and if it really does make a difference because, many people have noticed that when they change up their diet, their gut health does change. Have you found that when you start working with people?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's just that we've moved so far away from really understanding how our bodies work. I work with a lot of teenagers and talking to them about hormone health and nutrition. And when the light bulb kind of goes off like, oh, that's why this change happens, or that's why this is happening in my body at this time in my cycle, right? That's why I'm hungrier because my body is needing more energy at this time in my cycle. Just things like that, like, oh, that's what is happening when I'm constipated, or those are important things for us to understand because when we understand why, it gives, it provides more motivation for us. Like we can make that connection. And it makes it easier to translate the what needs to be done into the how to actually get it done.
Right. And then you mentioned for the gifted kids who like to run natural experiments or they're skeptical.
Yeah.
It allows them to actually monitor what's happening in their own bodies and getting back to self-regulation, being aware of their own internal environment, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and kind of keeping tabs on things and running their own natural experiment to see what happens.
Cool.
Yeah, Jenny, we'll email the slides. And Caroline, before Jenny jumps off, do you want to offer any of the recipes? Especially for anybody who's listening and can't watch this?
Yeah, sure. Can I share here? I wonder if I can share. Present.
You see the, try it.
Let's see if I can find this one. Let's see what happens. Let's see what you're going to see from my screen. Let's see if the right thing pulls up.
I don't see it quite yet. I'll let you know as soon as it comes.
If it's like going slowly or not, but I will pop this in the chat at least. And
when I upload this to YouTube, I can also include a link.
Okay.
See the link.
Oh, that's not that should be the right thing. So we'll see. I don't know why it's not letting me share that, but I've got a ton of recipe. Kids love pancakes. Right. We've got to start with like, what do people like already and kind of go from there, I think is always helpful. Right. Some fun soup recipes, getting kids involved in the kitchen in dicing, chopping, picking out colors or adding things in is always helpful. Smoothie recipes, some oat and coconut energy balls that are fun for kids to make and kind of snack on and eat. So just kind of starting, I like to start with, what are some things, oh, there it goes. Okay. What are some things that I already like, right? And then, oh, okay, thanks. I'll make sure that we have access to that in just a minute. Let's see if this is, sorry, I'm unfamiliar with Google Meet as much as Zoom, so forgive me.
You are doing a great job. It's showing up clearly on my end anyway.
I just can't scroll it, but at any rate, this will be a recipe guide. There are like 17 recipes here, directions, easy, like readable for kids to tackle. It's got some nutrition information, just including the amount of fiber. And, if kids aren't used to, or you aren't used to getting a lot of fiber in your diet, start slow with adding fiber foods. Going from like 0 to 60 can cause stomach upset sometimes for people. So that's just kind of one thing to note. But I'm going to try to make sure that that this is shareable, because it should have been shareable, but and I guess maybe if I'm scrolling here, you can see it. But, quesadilla.
Yeah, Jen said she could see it. This all looks so great. Thank you so much.
Friendly food, so some turkey chili and some kind of pancakes. But, getting in just some more fibrous foods where we can.
I know that the morning routines are really tough for parents. And so what have you found that is successful? Like that might be overnight oats, I know, is one that you could make ahead. The banana oat protein pancakes. I mean, what can you grab as a fistful on your way out the door? What would you recommend for parents to get these sorts of high nutrient value foods in?
Exactly. I mean, it takes a little bit of forward planning. I think that's one of the things I work most with my clients on in any regard. It's about the plans, right? So creating something like some egg cups, I'll zoom up to this one, something that you can grab and go toast with peanut butter and some apples, or some cauliflower egg bites that are like little muffins that you can grab and go, or something like this, like having some extra snacks on hand in the car when you're, got kids that have got lots of extracurricular activities and things going on. Those are great to have on hand as well. So,
wow, that looks amazing. Do you have to keep those in the fridge, or?
Those do better in the fridge. They kind of start to fall apart when they when they come out of the fridge. But
you could probably freeze them and then stick them in a lunchbox, I would imagine, and they would thaw by lunch. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is fabulous, Caroline. Amazing job. Such a great job putting all that together, and for sharing your expertise today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
The kids are like that. One thing that I came across in my research is the brain is a really, really big energy hog, and it really does need to be fed. And when it's not fed, I mean, it's obvious when we kind of come apart at the seams. And I think for at least what I've noticed in my family, there's times of like high brain consumption and work. And then there's times when, they're processing and they're not consuming as much information. And then they'll go into a phase of massive creative output. It's like a sine wave almost. And so I think the nutritional needs for gifted kids could swing wildly. Like, as parents, we may not really appreciate just how much food they may need and how much high protein food they may need when they're in these really high consumption and high creation stages. And then how they might actually feel terribly hungry some other times. So trying to help them stay in tune with, like, where are you in this phase of, and also recognizing that, that lull, that pause between like consumption and creation is not necessarily something's dramatically off. Like, they're not necessarily suffering in some way. Maybe they're having sort of this regrouping processing that I've seen go on in my family, where they're digesting all of the information they've taken in, and then it's going to get reassimilated. And then there's going to be some kind of creative push that comes out the other side. I don't know if you ever saw that with your students, or if this is making any sense. It's just a natural cycle I finally picked up on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Sorry, I'm trying to find a way to make sure that I can, before I have to jump off, that I can drop this sharing document into the call properly. I don't know why it's not sharing the way I usually like to share it. But I really thank you for, I wish I had a group like this when my kids were younger. I love sharing this information with parents. So, if anyone, my info is right there. If anybody wants to reach out and reach out to me, I would love to talk further about this anytime.
Awesome. And I know we're top of the hour and you've got to run and go work with clients, but CarolineMorinHealthCoaching.com, right?
Yes, correct.
And that's MORIN, and I'll put a link in the information below. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry about the unshareable. I'll get that to you so you can get it out to everybody properly in a PDF.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries. No worries.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was nice to